we'll go ahead and get started. And just enjoy those desserts. I don't know who made the pumpkin chocolate chip cookies, which I never thought of in the same food, but they're delicious. So if you have them, great. If you don't, you missed it. But there's other desserts, obviously. So I'm Deacon Mike for everybody, and this is the third session, and this particular session is going to be on the human person. But before we talk about that, we did have a couple of questions that people had, and so I'm gonna go through those questions. There's actually two. The first one is, what do Catholics believe about the rapture? Now, the rapture is, my understanding is that it's where believers will be taken up, snatched away before a period of tribulation, leaving the world behind in chaos. And there was, I think, a movie called, what was it, Left Behind? And we do not aspire, or we do not believe that. What we believe is that Christ's second coming will be in a single glorious visible event at the end time, and it's not secret, and it's not separating. How the judgment and everything works and trial and all that stuff we don't know, but we believe that what happens is Jesus will return one day. I think one thing to be clear about is that when we some of us are closer to the door of death than others in this room. So for the older folks, well, I'm a gray hair, I'm there. We are closer to the door of death, and so we think about it more. But what happens when we die? That's one of the questions people ask. And we as Catholics believe that, yes, you do have a soul, and we will talk about purgatory, that your soul, most people we think will probably go to purgatory first before instead of going directly to heaven. And purgatory is a place where if you make it, you're good, you're going to make it to heaven, but you have a period of purgation, to be purged of all the vestiges of sin, so that when you are in the presence of God, you are completely transparent in one sense. But what we believe is that that's not the end. In other words, that our souls, we are not angels. Angels are simply, how do I say this? Spiritual beings created by God to give messages to humans, actually. That's the purpose of angels. And so, but we're not angels. And so what will eventually happen to us? Well, we believe that Jesus will come back to earth, and that all of the people who are followers and believers that are on earth at the time will be saved and in this immortal state, and that people like probably myself will be resurrected the way Jesus was resurrected and put into, and I love this part, into our glorified bodies like Jesus, meaning that I won't have any more back pain, among other things. In other words, I'll be who Mike was intended to be. And that's the glory. And that all happens here on earth. And so the question of rapture is one that we don't believe that will happen. So that was one question. Whoever asked that, did that answer it adequately? Or I can't remember who asked it. They wrote it down on a piece of paper. So I guess I don't know who asked it. Take that back. Okay. The other question, and it's really a two-parter, is, and this is a basic question, and we get this all the time. What is the purpose of incense and bells at a Catholic Mass? What's that for? Well, incense has biblical roots. You can look to the Old Testament, and in Psalm 141 it says, "Let my prayer be counted as incense before you, O Lord." And incense is, think of it as being prayers rising up to God. Now, it's not a literal thing, it's more of a symbolic thing. you're going to learn when we get farther into talking about our Catholic faith that there is a difference between what we call a sacrament, and there are 7 of them, one of which, say, for example, is baptism is a sacrament. And then there are sacramentals. Sacraments are very special. Sacramentals are simply reminders to help us to think about Christ. For example, the crucifix back there, that is a sacramental. Okay? And so incense being used to lift up prayers to God is a sacramental, reminding us of that our prayers, that we do pray and we do ask for things from God. I think one of the problems is sometimes we talk too much to God and we don't listen, but that's a whole nother topic. So, but with that said, then incense is used at Mass as a symbol of our prayers going up to God. Now, when is it used? It depends upon the Catholic Church you go to. St. Henry, we like to use it at special Masses. What do I mean? Like, for example, this last, was it last Sunday was the Exaltation of the Cross? Yeah, if you were at the 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock Masses, you got incensed. And what I mean by you got incensed is this. What do you do with the incense? Well, the priest at the very beginning of the Mass will incense the altar where the consecration of the host is going to happen. So he goes around the altar. Did anybody see that? Okay. So then at the gospel reading, the deacon will incense the gospel, and I'll incense it 3 times. And once again, it's like the words of Jesus are so special and very important that we incense them. We bless them not in a sense, we bless them. Then the priest will again incense, he will incense the gifts once they're brought up and once they're on the altar. In other words, the bread and the wine. Before he consecrates it, he'll incense it. And then he'll hand I'm getting feedback. Is there? No. Now it is. Okay. Maybe that's it. Well, yeah, that may be it. Okay. So after he incenses the altar, you will notice that he turns to the deacon and hands the deacon the incense, and the deacon incenses him. And then the deacon will come around and they will incense the entire congregation. That's sort of what you do during a Mass. There are other times when we do what we call adoration, and we won't talk about all that because I don't want to overload you with stuff. But the point of the incense is that it's used as a symbol of prayers rising up to God, up to heaven. And as I said, it's used to honor and signify the sacred, the altar, the gospel, the Eucharist, the priest, and the congregation. Then the second question was, what about bells? What are the bells for? Why do we have bells? What's interesting, it's historical. Do you remember me talking about the Council of Nicaea, the one that came up with the Nicene Creed? Okay. That was the first council that the Catholic Church had, and that would have been in 325 AD, almost 1,700 years ago. Well, it was 1,700 years ago. This year? Oh my gosh! Yay! Okay, I'm sorry. I just realized that. I mean, I knew it, but I'd forgotten about it. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that was 1,700 years ago. Since then, there have been about 20 or so councils of the church at different times. The last one of which was what we call the Second Vatican Council, and it occurred in the 1960s, which for some of us, we were alive during that time. Many of you were not. And so what they did at that particular council, among other things, is they up until then, the Mass was in Latin, because Latin was the language of Europe, and that's where the Catholic Church was. And so when it spread to all these other places, it stayed in Latin. And so what happened was for a variety of reasons, and I won't go into it now, the council decided to change and allow the Mass to be said in the language of wherever it was, which we call the vernacular. And so when that happened, things changed. One of the things was before Vatican II, a lot of people didn't understand Latin. Most people didn't understand Latin. So although I think the homilies were in English, right? Yes. But the Mass itself was in Latin. And so people didn't know necessarily where they were in the Mass, when it was. And so the purpose of the bells is to signal important times during the Mass. Here's the reason why. A lot of people would have what we call devotions that they would do, like they would say a rosary, or they would do something else during the Mass while the Latin was being said because they didn't know what was being said. So the bell was rung to say, okay, something important is about to happen. Okay? And so there's really three times that the bells are rung. You'll hear the bells rung when the priest raises up his hand and brings down the Holy Spirit. And this is the moment of what they call the epiclesis, when he's bringing the Holy Spirit down into the bread and wine before he says those words that Jesus said at the Last Supper. This is my body and this is my blood. And so that's the first time when he brings his hands, and they ring it once. And if you ever notice now, the little altar server's sitting over there, and the deacon will go, and... because I'll nod, and most of the time they're really good about it. They're getting good. Then the second and the third time are when the priest raises, it's called the elevation. After he said the words of consecration, he raises up the large host, which is bread. It's what's the word? What is it that it doesn't rise? What is it? Unleavened. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Thank you. It's unleavened bread. And the wine is actual wine. It is sacramental wine in that it has to meet certain requirements in order to be considered sacramental wine. So it's rung 3 times. And that's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's why they do that, okay? Now, after Vatican II, there were some priests, and Father Mike Johnston was one, who was the priest here from 1993 until 2015. And then Father Mark Beckman, who is now Bishop Beckman in Knoxville, from 2015 until last year, 2024. So that's, I can't remember how many years it's, but it's like 3 decades. There were no bells because they were of the view that you didn't need the bells. Well, some priests like the bells. Some priests don't like the bells. It's up to the priest. You're going to find out that there are certain things that it just depends on what the priest likes and what the priest doesn't like, and that's okay because the Mass is still, it's still what we call valid. They're still within the guardrails, so to speak, if you know what I mean. Okay? So does that make sense about why we do that? And so I became Catholic with the bells, and I kind of missed them for a while, and then I forgot about them, and now when Father Eric brought them back, I kind of like them, to be quite frank. So, anyway. Okay, that's that. Now we move on to the human person. And like, if you have any questions that come up, there's a piece of paper there, and if you'll write it and give it to Kristen, I will research it and give like a little spiel of like 5 or 10 minutes on it, okay? Okay, now what I'm going to do next, well, I got to talk about that first, sorry. I'm dying to get over there because I like filling out stuff. That's one of those things that Father Mark and I are just like, that we like to write things on the board. We're old style, you know. Okay, first question about the human person. What makes humans different from other animals? And I have 2 things to mention. One is language. We have an extremely complex language in comparison. I know they do these studies with whales and dolphins and chimpanzees and the like, and they do have a primitive language, but it is primitive, let's face it. We have a very complex language, and it is both oral and written. And the key is written, because when they started writing, it really made all the difference, because all of a sudden we could start making histories, because the only histories you had were passed down orally from generation to generation, and that was not a very That's not a very efficient way to do it. Okay, that's one. One is language. The second one is self-awareness. I believe psychologists think that the first level of self-awareness is what you call when you look at yourself in the mirror and you know it's you, which is what little toddlers of about 2 or 3 years old will do. They finally, at some point, it clicks with them that they are a little person, you know. But they don't. But it's a very, very rudimentary idea of what self-aware is. It's not until the age of 7, around 7 or 8, that they become aware. They call that the age of reason, age of understanding. And in the law, I was a lawyer for 35 years, we would have this thing of the sevens. At age 7, you become aware, and then at age 14, you become aware at a more definite level, and then age 21. And at age 21, you become responsible. You become a responsible adult. And so it's somewhere around age 7 to 10 that people become aware that they're going to die. And that's very important, because once you become aware you're going to die, you have this ability to choose between what is good and evil, what we call good and evil, okay? Before that, when you're about 3 years old, it's me, 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 but you don't really understand, and you are wanting everything and all this sort of stuff. The human development is such that it really doesn't kick in, at least at a rudimentary level, until you're about age, like I say, 7 to 10. And then really, you don't develop the frontal cortex, which I tell my daughters who are now in their 20s, they can now say, well, Dad, my frontal cortex is developed. Before that, the ability to make judgments and decisions is not fully there, because that frontal lobe is not fully developed, they say, until about the age of 24 or 25, I think. And so it makes a difference. So you can talk to somebody who's 19 and they think they know what's going on, and they really don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, but they don't. Not completely, not until they're in their 20s. Okay, so that's what makes us different, the self-awareness and language. Now, what I'm going to do, and this is based on what, I'm still using his schematic here, Father Mark or Bishop Beckman used when he taught. How many years did he teach RCIA? Because he taught it 13 years at St. Matthew, and then he taught it 9 years here, so it's 22 years, 2 decades of teaching this, and he loved it. And he told me, he said when he left, he says, I'm going to find a way to teach as a bishop, so good luck. Okay, so the first question, where do we come from? Now, when I say secular and Catholic, what I'm saying, secular are those people, it's not those people who are atheists, it's those people who just don't think about God. They just don't, God is not part of their life. It's not that they're saying there is no God, it's just like they don't think about God. And so they go about life trying to do the best they can in the world, you know. And so when you ask them a question of where do we come from, their answer is probably generally going to be, we evolved, evolution, okay? And that it's totally random. In other words, we're just all kind of these molecules that have come together randomly, and here we are, you know. But there's no God or anything. It just happened, okay? It happened how many billion years ago when the first life came to Earth and all that sort of. First life developed in terms of proteins and blah 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 and all that stuff. Now, what do Catholics believe? We believe in creation by a loving God through, we think, evolution. So we don't believe that there are some Protestant denominations that they take a literal interpretation of the Bible, and if you literally look at the Bible, if you count it all up, there have been some what's his name, Bishop Ussher in the 1800s did a calculation and said that the world was created 4,004 years ago on October 12th. That's what he said. We, as Catholics, we don't reject science. We think that science is part of our faith, is the best way to put it, okay? And so that evolution did occur, we think, but we do not believe that we believe that evolution occurred under divine guidance. I'll get it out. So, does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
Would that be described as like theological evolution?
I think so. That's a fair statement. Yeah, and we will be talking about something that's similar to that idea when we talk about divine pedagogy. Divine pedagogy is the gradual revelation or the progressive revelation of God to humanity over time, and that's what the Bible is, reaching its culmination in the form of Jesus Christ, who's both fully human, fully divine. And we'll talk about that at a later time. What I want to focus on is humans, because we're going to talk about the mystery of God next week. So what we're talking about is where do we come from, and then why are we here? And what secular folks believe is we choose, and it's a really fancy word, and I remember as a freshman, no, it was farther than that. I think I was a sophomore in college when I took all these philosophy courses, and I fell in love with this. I thought this was a great thing because, hey, we get to choose what we want to do. I get to choose my purpose, and I can make it whatever I want it to be, you know. And I thought that was really cool. And there's a big fancy word for it. It's existentialism. But the problem with that is there is no God, and it doesn't make, you can choose whatever you want to, but it's all meaningless in one sense. What the problem with the existential philosophers is they end up going down that rabbit hole of what is the meaning of life? Whatever I make it, well, you know? So, on the other hand, if we're Catholic, it's to love God and to love neighbor. That's why we are here. And there's, I'll put to know, love, and serve God. And that's St. Ignatius of Loyola. Father Mark would love that because he likes St. Ignatius. I'm sorry. St. Ignatius is very, he's a 16th century saint. He founded the Jesuit order, the Jesuit priests, and they're really smart and very intense. And so St. Ignatius came up with this very simple concept of we are here to know God. That means we have to learn about God, and we have to spend time studying, to love God. God loved us first, but to love God, and then to serve God in whatever way. That we take our whole soul and being is somehow, now that doesn't mean that we all become, religious folks. It means that whatever you do, whether you're a doctor, a carpenter, or you work in the school as a teacher, whatever it is, that you do it with great love. There's a saint, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, who said that she does, she felt terrible at first when she was Catholic because she was cradle Catholic. She lived in France in the 1800s. She felt terrible because she couldn't be like the great. She analogized it to a flower garden, and that all these great flowers like St. Peter and St. Paul and all these others who were these great saints that she called these great flowers, and she looked at herself as a little bitty daisy. She was a little bitty daisy. But she realized that it doesn't matter. It's whatever you are, you pour great love into even the smallest little act. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go out and save the world. Jesus has already saved the world. We're just serving him by loving others. And we get our love from God, and then we take it and we push it out to the world. Okay. So, where are we going? Well, oblivion. And this is Epicureanism. Epicurus, you know, the eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. That's a little overstated. Epicurus was really, he was a Greek philosopher that thought that we should enjoy our senses, but we shouldn't do it to an extreme, but that life was about, he was very much of an exterior person, okay? And so the problem with that, of course, is that when you die, that's it. There are many people who think that when you die, that's it, that's all there is. They don't think there's anything else other than you can see, feel, hear, or touch. And I am so grateful that I have been touched by God by that gift of faith, that I believe that there's more to this world than just what we see, feel, hear, or touch. I think heaven is not up there. You know, people keep going up. Well, that's because that's an ancient idea. I don't think it's up there. I think, this is my own personal opinion, it's another dimension. And they may be right here with us and we don't know it, okay? I don't know. It's above my pay grade. And I think it's above everybody's pay grade, basically. So, what are Catholics? What do you believe? Where are we going? Eternal life. That means eternal happiness. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Eternal life is not, my spiritual director, I'm going to be going up to him next week. He's a monk up at St. Meinrad. He is such a bright man. He said, you know, Mike, it's not, when you die, it's not going to be a continuation. It's not going to be like a continuation of the timeline that you're in now, because we're trapped in time, right? We're three-dimensional creatures and we're trapped in this time. I say trapped. We can't go back in time. We can't go forward in time. We just have to march time. He said, to be in the presence of God, time will be absent. It won't be there. It will be irrelevant, because you're going to be in the presence of the Creator who created the entire universe out of love. So you're going to be there wherever there is. So we use these three-dimensional words. It's hard for us to get our head around it. So now, then, what's wrong with us? You know, we got a lot of problems. There's a lot of discord and all this stuff. The secular people would think lack of knowledge. If we just learn enough, and social circumstances. That somehow they believe that we can fix it. That there are people that believe that we can make it to where we live in a utopia. Utopia meaning being a perfect society. Not going to happen. So what's wrong with us? This goes to original sin and this thing called concupiscence. That means this tendency to sin, this tendency that's in all of us to do the things that we know are harmful to other people, basically. To harm other people or harm our world, but more specifically to harm other people. You know, physically or psychologically, there's all kinds of things. And then the last one is, what's the solution? Education and social transformation. If you just educate people enough, we can transform society. And what we believe as Catholics is salvation through grace. So it's a very different view of who we are, if you see what I'm saying. This relies on us and nothing else. We're just out here on this little planet and there's nobody else, and we're going to try and figure this out ourselves. And this says that we think that we were created by a loving God, and I'll explain in a minute about the creation and the fall, but we're created by a loving God who is promising us eternal life through salvation. That we're saved. That all we have to do is if we believe and we try. We're not going to be perfect. That's one thing that's I want to make very, very clear is you don't have to be. None of us are perfect. A lot of us like to act like we're perfect, but we're not. And we have that outward exterior that we think, we're trying to, all you got to do is go to social media, some of the exotic places people go, Antarctica, I mean, really? The next thing you're going to see is people up in space, and these space tourists and all that sort of stuff. It's just, it misses the point. We're here to what? It really gets down to love God, love your neighbor, and to love, know, and serve God through serving other people, okay? So before I get into the next part, are there any questions about that? Is it clear as mud? Okay. Adam and Eve. Now, we as Catholics, the story of Adam and Eve is a very important story because it's about the fall of humanity, okay? It's not intended as a literal story. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to understand why we have this tendency to do this thing that we call sin. Again, my spiritual director said to me one time, we were talking about sin, and he said, well, Mike, think about this. If there were no human beings on this planet, okay, no human beings, there would be no sin. Sin is a human thing, and it's this choice that we make between what we call good and evil. And in paradise, Adam and Eve, we are saying, were humans that were incapable of sin because they didn't know what good and evil was. Okay? They didn't know. So this might be primitive human beings. Didn't know what good and evil is. Just like animals don't know what good and evil is. Okay? God tells the humans that they can eat of the fruit of any tree, but the fruit of the tree of good and evil. The knowledge of good and evil. That's the one tree they can't eat from. Okay, they can eat from the tree of life, but they can't eat from that one tree. And so the tempter, who we call Satan, in the form of a snake, or I don't know that he uses the word snake. I'm trying to remember. Serpent. Thank you. Same thing. But anyway, this slithering little creature asks, why can't you eat the fruit of any tree? If you look at it closely, he says any tree. So he's asking, he's changing, he's twisting reality right there. And they say, well, no, it's only the tree of the fruit of good and evil because we will die if we do. And then tempter says, you won't die, and you will be like God because you will know good and evil. Again, a half-truth. Because he tells them that it's not true. They will die, but it is true that they will be like God in that they will know the difference between good and evil. Do you see? And so what happens? They eat of the tree of fruit of good and evil, and they realize that they are not clothed and they are ashamed, and they try and hide from God, and God says, what's going on here? And you know the rest. And so I think it's important to understand there is a connection between knowing that you're going to die and sin. There is a connection between the two. And when humans eat that fruit, it opened their eyes to two things, good and evil and their own mortality. And sin was born. And we disobeyed God because why? We kind of wanted to be God. And we were given a God quality, and that is the knowledge of good and evil, but we are mortals. We're not God. Before the fall, humans were blissfully happy. And then after the fall, they lost that happiness. Okay? Now, this is where, that is, I'm pretty sure that's probably, if I remember correctly, pretty much what Father Mark would go through. I have this little added thing on that I like to talk about, and it's about happiness. And this is Father Thomas Keating, who was a Trappist monk, and he is the one that came up with centering prayer. And we're not going to talk about centering prayer. We're just going to talk about the basis of it, which is these, what he calls 3 false programs of happiness. And each program is a desire on our part to be like God. So the first one is safety and security. We want to be immortal. We want to be comfortable. And so there is this tendency toward an obsession with gathering up as many possessions as we possibly can, or as much wealth as we possibly can. I mean, how much money can people have? How much, at a certain point, these people who are billionaires, who is it? Bill Gates and Melinda Gates are spending, they got smart. They're spending all their time giving it away, which I think is a great thing. But a lot of people, they just sit there on those piles of money and they're still not satisfied. Okay, that's one, is that we want to be godlike by being safe and secure and having all of this wealth around us, okay? The second one is control and power. Anybody control freaks in here? Nobody's admitting to being a control. Oh, there's a few that admit. I think everybody in here at some point is a control freak because you want to control your own life. Well, you want to control the world around you. You want to control your universe, and suddenly you're saying, I want to be God. You know, who was it? The Apple guy, Steve Jobs. They said, I read the biography by Isaacson or whoever it was, and he said that some of the people around Jobs would say that he bent reality to make it fit with what he wanted to do. But in the end, sadly, he got cancer and would not take the treatments, the normal treatments, and tried to do all these alternative medical treatments, and he died. So, control and power, to be all powerful. And then the third one is praise and esteem. Don't you like being praised? Don't you like being told you did a good job and you're doing great and you're all wonderful and everything and everybody loves you and you're wanting to be worshiped like God? That's what we're wanting. So we're wanting to be immortal, all-powerful, and be worshiped. Those are the 3 programs. And so they are the things that we all, underlying a lot of the stuff, as long as we're getting those things, and let me go on to say, okay, God's love is the solution to earthly desires for happiness. It's the only solution. And there's a saint that you will hear us talk about a lot, Saint Augustine. He lived in around 400 AD, and he wrote a book called The Confessions. And on the very first page of that book, he says, "My heart will not rest, O Lord, until it rests in Thee." In other words, that we have restless hearts, and we're never satisfied. And what he's saying is the only place that we'll be satisfied is with God. Okay? Now, there's 17th century, I know I'm throwing a whole lot at you, but I want to tell you who it comes from. I'm not just making this up to myself. Blaise Pascal, he was a theologian and a mathematician from the 17th century, and he came up with this idea that I use a lot, and that is a God hole. That we all have this hole right here in our hearts, not literally, but it's spiritually. We have this hole, and that the only way to satisfy that is God. God's the only one that can satisfy that with God's love. And that what we have a tendency to do is try and fill that hole with either safety and security, control and power, or praise and esteem. And we try and do it ourselves. We're trying to make our own happiness. And it won't work. In fact, what happens is when you keep shoving all that stuff in there, it blocks up the hole to where God can't even get any love into our hearts because we're so obsessed with these different things that we're trying to do to make us happy. I'll give you an example. I'm still a runner, but at one point I was obsessed with running. I would run like 40 or 50 miles a week, and I would run marathons, and I run lots of marathons, and I just was, it did something for me that made me feel good about myself. It made me, when I would place, and I still do this, I don't know why, when I place like third in the over 80 or over 70 group, in a run, I'm happy. I think that's the greatest thing in the world. And I'm thinking, good gosh, Mike, you're still doing it. And so we do have this tendency to do that. Everybody here has got something that they're working, and they're working it to make themselves feel happy. And what I'm telling you, folks, is that's not what true happiness is. That's not joy. Not joy in the sense of God. Only God can do that. And God, you have to spend time with God in prayer, come into Mass, and really on a regular basis before God will finally start showing up in your life. Because when you do that, it's sort of like you're trying to, the only time you come to God is when something bad happens. And it's like God's going, well, who are you? You suddenly show up out of nowhere. That's not how it works. You spend time each day with God, and you develop a relationship with God. And God will provide what you need when you need it, in God's time and in God's way, not necessarily the way you think it should be. So, we're not meant to be also complete here on earth. We're not complete. We are works in progress. And we're in a sense, in the Catholic Church, we talk about this. We talk about we're on a journey, we're pilgrims journeying together. We're in a foreign land because this is not the land that we're ultimately going to be at. Okay? Also, we believe that God's grace comes to us in cooperation with human efforts, what we call works. We don't believe that we can work our way to heaven. Some people will say that's what we do, but we don't. We believe that you have to cooperate, though, with what we call grace, which is the love of God in your daily life. And if you do that together, working together, you will have those moments of unexpected joy that come in life. Hasn't everybody had some moment where you had a joy that you didn't necessarily even deserve, and it just happened, and you're just, and it could be not necessarily a big thing. It just is, okay? So, can't earn our way to heaven. The purpose of life, we're not working ourselves to get to heaven. We are already touching and tasting heaven now. And it's those little bits of taste, those little bits of glimpses or glints or whatever you want to call it, that we receive that help us to keep going on our journey. And so there's a Greek word that you'll hear a lot. I'll just put it up over here. Metanoia. And that means we don't think that you once you're that your salvation is a single moment in time. There are some denominations, and that's what they believe, and that's fine. They believe that you're saved at a certain point, and that from that point on, everything's good. We believe that it's a gradual progression, a metanoia, and that it's sort of like you're a block of granite, or marble, excuse me, not granite, a block of marble, and that God is chipping away to form you into the human being that you're meant to be. And some of that chipping away can be painful at times, but it is how God works on us. Sometimes you think the worst thing in the world that ever happened to me, when it happened, at the moment that it happened, 5 or 10 years later, you go, boy, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. If that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't. You'll see, the older you get, the more you look back and you see the curves and stuff happening, and you're thinking, oh, this is why I'm here, So then, let's see, purpose of life. When we fall down, there's a French saint, Francis de Sales, who he has a book called Introduction to a Devout Life, and basically he talks about us being on this pilgrimage together, and that sometimes we will fall down, and when we fall down, that's we commit a sin, and that the thing to do is to just get back up and dust yourself off, go to confession. We'll talk about that later. And then just keep walking on your journey. To admit it, don't. This is one thing that's very important, is owning up to your own self. To admitting it to yourself, not trying to lie to yourself. Okay? What time is it? Oh, we're good. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. Are there any questions about any of this? Have I made clear, particularly the thing about the 3 programs of emotional happiness, the 3 false programs of emotional happiness, I think is one of those things that's so very, very important, because really everything can be plugged into one of those 3. It's either control and power, or praise and esteem, or comfort and safety and security, but it's really, once safety and security is established, then it becomes comfort, and how long can I live, and all that sort of stuff. And as creatures, this, safety and security was the first, primitive humans, that was the first and most important thing, right? And then these other things came about, but they don't satisfy to just, fixate on one or the other, like praise and esteem, for example. I have said before, I'm a recovering successaholic, okay? Because when I was a lawyer, man, that was what it was all about. It was like how many, I'll never forget my boss, one of the attorney generals, we had this real big case that we were going to go over and try in a court. And he looked at us and said these words, either come back bearing your shield or on it, meaning either you win or you go home, essentially. So that sort of attitude of the win-lose attitude of life, that's what I lived for 25 years when I was in the Attorney General's office. When I got to the clerk's office, it wasn't quite that way, because I was working for the decision makers, the judges. But those, you count. I can tell you, lawyers keep up with who wins and how much they won and all that stuff, because that's important. That's very, very important to them. Win-loss record. Sad. Makes you feel better. Okay. Now, there are no questions at all. Somebody got any questions? Even from the sponsors. Does this all make sense? Oh, God winks. God winks are moments of joy that come about when there's a thing. What she's talking about when we say God, when I say a God wink, it's things are not just oftentimes coincidental; they're providential, and when these things happen, there's a word they use. It's called synchronicity. Have you ever been doing something or reading something or whatever it is, and there's something else that happens, and it all seems to line up just right, and you're going, how did that happen? That's called synchronicity. That's a God wink. That's where you're sort of seeing just a little glimpse of God, because God is putting you in those places. I honestly believe that, because there's sometimes it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. I mean, you can believe it's just coincidental, but that's when, if you are an existentialist, you believe that we're nothing, the human beings are nothing but a random collection of atoms, that's all we are. This is all just, so enjoy it while you can, enjoy the ride, because we're all going to die. So, good question. Any others? No other questions? Yes, sir. That's okay. Mike? Mm-hmm. Correct. Correct. I don't know that we're saying that there was an Adam and Eve. What I'm saying is that Adam and Eve are a teaching point, and that at some point human beings probably were like Adam and Eve, and that they didn't understand. They weren't conscious in the way. They were not self-aware. And what I'm saying is very Catholic. This idea that there's two. The focus on whether Adam and Eve existed is not so important as the point that got across about how evil came into the world. And evil came into the world because we became aware of ourselves, and by becoming aware of ourselves, we became aware of death of ourselves. And out of that comes sin. Correct, all guided by God. All guided by God. And it's not so, the key to it is understanding that sin is out there, and it is a human thing. Like I said, if you didn't have any humans, there would be no sin, which is a hard thing to think. But yeah. Yes, ma'am. God allows evil. Shoot, I don't know Let me look this up real quick. God allows, this is a good question, and we had this last night in our Bible study. If I can find it, I have another copy of this at home. EVEX, full delivered consequences. Yes, 3:12. There it is. This is out of the Catechism, which is a book that they haven't received yet, have they? Oh, they have. Okay. Well, if you'll go to, you don't have to do it now, but let me see if I can find this. Yeah, I found it. The question, and this is in paragraph 309. It starts with, if God, the Father Almighty, the creator of the ordered and good world, cares for all of his creatures, why does evil exist? Why does God allow evil? This is more of a question of why does God allow it, not how did it come about, which I think is a more important question. To this question, as pressing as it is unavoidable and as painful it is mysterious, no quick answer will suffice. Only Christian faith as a whole constitutes the answer to this question. The goodness of creation, the drama of sin, and the patient love of God who comes to meet man by his covenants, the redemptive incarnation of his Son, his gift of the Spirit, his gathering of the church, the power of the sacraments, and his call to the blessed life to which all free creatures are invited to consent in advance, but from which, by a terrible mystery, they can also turn away in advance. In other words, they can choose to do evil. But why did God not create a world so perfect that no evil could exist in it? With the infinite power, God could always create something better but with an infinite wisdom and goodness, God freely willed to create a world in a state of journeying, does that sound familiar? Toward its ultimate perfection. What I would say here is what I was just saying a minute ago is that each of us are journeying in a state of metanoia toward becoming more like Jesus, but the entire universe is moving toward that. And the creation itself, God, the universe is not complete. We are in the midst of creation is the way I say it. And so when we say he allows evil, because he allows human beings the ability to do something that only God can do, and that is to choose between good and evil. God always chooses good, but to choose good and evil, unlike any other creature in the world. They don't know. And so goes on to say, in God's plan, this process of becoming involves the appearance of certain beings and the disappearance of others, the existence of more perfect along the less perfect, both constructive and destructive forces. Then he talks about with physical good, there also is physical evil. What he's talking about physical evil is hurricane or tornado. Those things happen. It's like, why did that happen? It's an evil in that it kills life. That's what we're getting at. But then he goes on to say, angels and men, love that, angels and men, as intelligent and free creatures have to journey toward their ultimate destination by their free choice and preferential love. Now the thing is, angels always choose good. Why? The good angels do. You have the fallen angels, but the good angels always choose good. Why? Because they have had the beatific vision. They have seen God face to face, and they are just in love with God because God is so good to them. Okay, thus they can therefore go astray. That's referring to humans. Indeed, they have sinned, thus moral evil, that's moral evil, incommensurably more harmful than physical evil, entered the world. God is in no way, directly or indirectly, the cause of moral evil. He permits it, however, because he respects the freedom of his creatures. And there's a mystery there as to why is he doing this. And the answer is we don't know why he's doing it, but we do know that he is doing it, and he is allowing it to happen. Okay? Good question. And I'm glad I actually remembered the paragraph number. I can't believe it. It brings back my old attorney days when I'd have to grab something on the fly. Okay, that was last night. Any other questions? Well, we're up to 8 o'clock. There should be questions on your table, so take those questions and start discussing them among yourselves.